Hello and welcome to DIY Cars Generations. This is technically a continuation of DIY Race Cars. You may consider it Episode 2. I will consider it Episode 2. But the reason why that I'm calling it this is because, for one, we are not actually racing race cars today. Today we are going to be racing one specific vehicle model, the Chevrolet Camaro. For this challenge, we are going to have the Camaro ZL1, the 2012 model, set a benchmark time around a racetrack, in this case Infineon Raceway, and a couple of other generations of Camaro will be tuned up to the exact same PI as the Camaro ZL1, and they'll try to beat it around the track. So here we have the benchmark car, the Chevrolet Camaro ZL1. Just in case that you did not know what the stats are, it is powered by what is originally the Corvette ZR1's engine, now designated as an LSA instead of LS9, tuned down to about 580 horsepower. With that, you do expect for it to be quite a lot of a handful, especially considering that it is a muscle car. However, it is quite easy to handle, actually. It's not that bad of a car to drive, honestly. You can drive into the corners pretty decently, and you can step on the throttle. You don't step on it as you're getting out of the corners, because that is how you get sideways, but the power is actually handled quite well. I think part of it does have to do with the fact that it is quite heavy, also with the fact that Chevrolet has actually done pretty good with making sure that the Camaro is able to handle all the power. The car handles pretty nicely. It handles deliberately, a little bit understeery, but that is to be expected with a huge, almost 4,000-pound muscle car. But I'm not surprised. It handles decently, and it set a pretty good time at Infineon Raceway. Of course, we must get on to the next cars that we are going to be showing. Up next, we have the 2010 Chevrolet Camaro SS. Now, of course, this is the same generation as the Chevrolet Camaro ZL1. As a matter of fact, the difference is by 2 years. But first of all, let me just explain a little bit of kind of what happened. So, when I was making the video, I was imagining that DIY Cars Episode 2 would be quite similar to Episode 1 in the sense of it would be the one race car and one street car, or in this case it would be one tuned up car versus the lower line model tuned up. At that time I was thinking of doing the Camaro ZL1 versus the Camaro SS tuned up to be a ZL1, the Lotus 211 against the Lotus Elise, and probably something else at the time, but I can't think of it right now. But in the middle of filming, I decided that I didn't want to actually do that, so that's why I had actually done this car. I'd driven this car before the ZL1, because as I had said before, I tend to drive the race car variants later, because I treat it with a little bit of pessimism in comparison with the tuned cars, because if you were to drive the race cars first and then drive the tuned cars, you'll probably have a little bit of mentality expecting that the tuned car is actually going to say handle as well as the race car, and in most cases that isn't true, such as with the Nissans from the previous episode. So when I tuned up the Camaro, I accidentally forgot that it was supposed to be to the PI of the ZL1. I had actually spec tuned it to A-Class, so what I basically did, I put in the engine straight from the Corvette ZR1, meaning that it has 638 horsepower instead of 580 horsepower. It does have race tires and various handling bits, and it set the PI to 600. Unfortunately, it still didn't actually handle as good as expected. The car was harder to control. It felt a little bit more twitchy, and it was a bit harder to control in the corners. I may have put a racing transmission in there, but I kept the gear ratios the same because it was reasonable. The gear ratios, I mean, it wasn't that crazy, but honestly, the car wasn't as fun as the ZL1 to drive. But to be honest, not even the ZL1 was too fun to drive. It was okay, but this was just a bit of a handful. It was a little bit too much for me. 638 horsepower probably would not have worked so much. But we are going to go on, this time all the way back around 40 years, to the original Chevrolet Camaro. Now, of course, the Z28 1969 Chevrolet Camaro is an old muscle car, and you would expect it to actually handle pretty terribly considering the fact that it is an old muscle car and probably prefers to drive in a straight line. As a matter of fact, you would actually be entirely wrong, because it turns out that the way I tuned this Camaro actually made it the most fun out of all of the Camaros to drive. I had put in pretty much race tires, race weight reduction, race handling, everything, and the engine parts up to 362 horsepower. I was planning on putting in a newer engine such as the one from the 2002 Camaro, but then it kind of didn't make sense considering that I would be testing the Camaro, the 2002 one, later on. You'll be seeing that later in the video, so I kept the original engine. So it is up to 362 horsepower, and surprisingly, it drove very, very, very nicely. And I'm not saying that just in relativity, I'm saying that just overall. The car felt really nice to drive. Surprisingly. Honestly, I was surprised. I was really shocked at how easy it was to drive. And it felt a lot faster too. It sounded faster, and it definitely pulled out of the corners real easily. You could put the power down earlier than you could with the ZL1, and you could pretty much just stamp on it, and it felt like that it was accelerating just as quickly with not as much horsepower. It handled very, very nicely. It basically was a race car. Now, I do remember that I did put the aero up all the way. I basically did make it a race car. I didn't put rules for DIY cars on how I was supposed to tune it. I just said basically just spec tune it all the way, because I don't know, the challenge is just to compete with it, and if it says it's equal with it, it's supposed to mean it's equal with it. And with the race tires in Forza 4, they actually don't feel that good. Like I said with the previous DIY cars episode with the Skyline GTR, I forgot to put race tires on them, but it actually didn't change it that much. It may have been 1 or 2 seconds, but the car itself did not feel that much different. Whereas, say, with Gran Turismo 5, if you have race tires on versus having road tires on, the difference is night and day. So, really? Race tires don't actually make that much difference, but nevertheless, the 69 Camaro was actually my favorite car to drive. So at this point, you should probably realize that the cars are going out of order. It's not chronological order. It is because at the point of the filming, I owned a 2010 SS, a 2012 ZL1, and a 69 Z28. I had not bought 3 of the Camaros, so I just bought them as I pleased. The first car that I had bought out of the showroom for filming was this Camaro, the IROC Z. I had put, naturally, race tires, race handling, everything, and various engine parts to bring it up to 329 horsepower. Not quite as much as the 1969 Z28. Nevertheless, it felt okay to drive. It felt better than the ZL1. It felt like it turned in more easily. Nevertheless, it wasn't as good as the 69 Camaro. But it was okay, and as you can tell, Alicorn Twilight on the hood just because I can. And also because I didn't have anything painted on it, so I just needed to put Alicorn Twilight on it. By the way, that Alicorn Twilight is as seen on my Recreating Epic Car Showcase. Thanks to the gamer tag of the person is now changed. She is now Sparkle Alicorn. Twilight Sparkle Alicorn, basically. Not Derpy Hooves 1 anymore, not Flittershy, just not any of that. It's Sparkle Alicorn. So if you do want to check out her stuff, go ahead. It's in the Forza storefront. I have no idea if she has an Xbox One. Probably not, because I still see her online. But still, Z28, not Z28 Camaro, the IROC Z 80s Camaro was decent to drive. Was it the best car of the 80s, at least according to Top Gear? I'm not quite sure. Maybe it was, but then again, I wasn't born in the 80s. I was born in the 90s. You should be able to tell at this point that the cars are not in chronological order anymore, because I have jumped all the way up to 2002 for the 35th anniversary Camaro that I guess not too many people liked, and I guess wasn't really that big on nostalgia or anything, which I suppose is why Chevrolet sort of pulled the plug on it in the Firebird while it rethought its plan. Which, it was a good idea that it rethought of its plan, because honestly, the new Camaro is definitely better. The old Camaro, I have no idea. because I did just play the Camaro race car a lot in Gran Turismo 4, but it's not like I knew much about the heritage and the nostalgia and all that. But this car had race tires, race handling stuff, and all of that. I only put one engine part in it, and that was race ignition to put it up to the PI of the ZL1, 572 by the way, which now has 351 horsepower, so it is the third most powerful car, not counting the ZL1 Camaro. And it handled actually a bit slow in the corners. It felt like it was quite heavy, and I think it was a bit heavier than all the other cars, and that is to be expected considering that as the cars get older they tend to get heavier naturally. And it was okay. I wouldn't drive that car any day. It wasn't the most fun car really, so once I got it done, I was done with the car, honestly. I was done with it. The car was okay, but I didn't want to deal with it too much. I just painted it a little bit, and I was done. That's it. Done. Goodbye. Next car. The last car that we have for today is the 1979 Camaro Z28. I could have chosen the 1970 Camaro, but I didn't because for one, I don't like it. At least I don't like how it looks. Number 2, the 1979 Camaro is the same one as Bumblebee in the original Michael Bay Transformers. And number 3, the 1979 Camaro actually starts out slower, or at least a lower PI, so theoretically that would give it more room to play around with tuning and stuff. I did paint it to look sort of like Bumblebee, but I'm not the best artist in the world, and this is not supposed to be a Recreating Epic Cars episode. By the way, a Recreating Epic Cars episode will come out eventually. Soon, I know for sure. But I mean, I actually did put other stuff on it. I think I put what did I put in it? I put ponies on it. You should be able to see. I can't see it right now for some reason. But yeah, the Camaro has Bumblebee, ponies, and an Equestria James Bond license plate, if you can see the back. This car, much like the 69 Z28, it actually was pretty nice to drive. I guess that's to be expected if you're considering that it's an older car that you are able to take quite a lot of weight out of. I think it was a tad lighter than the 69 Camaro Z28. However, if you were to have me choose between the two cars, like I said, the 69 Z28 Camaro was just more fun, and I'm pretty sure it will look better around the track. But lastly, just a random thing, if you do want a little bit of driving tips on Infineon Raceway, I don't actually have that much to give to you. However, for the first corner, the driving line does tell you to swing out wide and come in as you're going up the corner. However, my recommendation, at least with these cars, is that you can actually sort of hug the inside wall right before the right turn. If you can do that without going into the tire bundle, you'll go into the corner a lot faster and you don't have to use the brake. I tended to use that for pretty much all of my cars, and by doing that I was able to keep my lap times up and faster than they would if I were to have followed the driving line. And now it is time to go over the lap times for all of these Camaros. Our benchmark car, the Chevrolet Camaro ZL1, did the time in a 1 minute 47.531. The Chevrolet Camaro SS 2010 did it in a 1:47.766. That is actually a little bit surprising for me because the car actually is a higher PI than the ZL1 by about 28 PI, yet it wasn't able to beat the ZL1 Camaro. I think that probably has to do with the track and the track layouts. By the way, it was the Indy layout at Infineon. But I think maybe if it was at a longer track, maybe such as Road Atlanta or Road America, there probably would have been a better chance for it. The 69 Camaro Z28 did it in a 1:46.174. The Camaro IROC Z did it in a 1:47.372. The 35th anniversary Camaro did it in a 1:45.577, And lastly, the 1979 Z28 did it in a 1:45.518. So surprisingly, it's the 79 Camaro that's actually faster than the 69. Honestly, I'm going to have to say that's straight line speed. And for the 35th anniversary, honestly, I can't say. Maybe it was just a little bit better controlled in the corners, but I'm not sure. I didn't like the car. But the 79 Camaro was the fastest. It was okayish to drive. Still, I'd go with the 69 Camaro because it's the looks. This car looks absolutely cool. At least definitely in comparison with all the other Camaros. But anyway, that is it for this episode of DIY Cars Generations. Expect more to be coming in the future. I do have ideas for what's going to be coming, including regular DIY race cars episodes. But thank you very much for watching. God bless you, and until next time, goodbye.